Good morning to the Cranleigh community. It's so lovely to be with you again. And I believe I've saved the best till last. We are now at the end of a very, very busy, challenging and positive year for us all in all different ways and forms. So it is so lovely to be with you for our final Cranleigh Community Connects session with you this morning. I want to tell you a little bit more about our speaker, but before I do, I would like to publicly thank the Cranleigh Community Committee for their endless dedication, especially this year where we have had to conduct these sessions online, and we've all had to learn in weird and wonderful ways how to ensure that we can reach the community. So we are still here with you, and we have got 2 and a bit weeks till the end of term, and we're not going anywhere. So as I've said, I feel I've saved the best to last. So let me tell you a little bit about our speaker this morning before I bring her on. And I do hope I pronounce her surname correctly. So Louise Traherne is a coach and director of character education at Role Models. Louise is director of character education at Role Models, where she uses her experience in education as a coach to create program of life skill courses. And this is online and offline for children ages 3 to 15. So such an array of experience. She develops new and exciting ways to help children explore the 4 key areas of resilience, leadership, creative problem solving, and collaboration. And a lot of these we find in our Cranleigh Code in order to be the best versions of themselves and reach their full potential. A little bit more about Louise. Louise has a degree in psychology, 12 years experience as a teacher, including 5 years as a senior deputy head at a London prep school. So she knows what it's like. She knows what we're all going through at the moment. And I know she's been a great sounding board for myself and some of the teachers here at Cranleigh. She now works as a qualified coach, working one-to-one with adults, teenagers and children to help them move forward with specific goals, exploring limiting beliefs and develop their direction and confidence. And I know when I read this bio, and I've been speaking to Louise for a while now, I felt already I'd learned so much about children's development and myself. And just a bit of a background, Role Models are a company, an organisation that we really hope to work with further in the future. And Louise explore a little bit more about this in her talk. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Louise to say good morning. Morning, Louise.
Hi there, Natasha, and good morning to everyone joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me on.
No worries. Like I said, I feel we've saved the best till last, and it has been really wonderful getting to know you, Hugo, and the team at Role Models. And I'm really excited for parents and children to hopefully work with you much more heading into the new academic year. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Louise. And while Louise is just sharing her screen, can I just remind the parents to please do put their comments and questions in the chat function on Facebook and on YouTube. And depending on the time we have, I'll be sure to see if we can answer as many questions as possible. Okay, I'm just going to share Louise's screen and then hand over to Louise. Okay, all yours, Louise.
Thank you, Natasha. Fantastic. Well, as I've said, it's a real pleasure to be joining you this morning, and I'm here to talk about perfectionism, which is a topic that I feel very passionate about myself. Today is going to be about how we can let go of perfectionism. And as I talk through my slides this morning, I'm very much focusing on children, but I also invite us to think about ourselves as adults. Personally, I think perfectionism for myself is something that I'm always holding in my mind. So some of the strategies and ideas will be very much, I hope, applicable for both children that you work with, but also yourselves as adults. So Natasha, thank you for that great introduction. I'm just going to add to that briefly to say that my background is in teaching. As Natasha said, I'm now Director of Character Education at Role Models, and I'll tell you briefly a little bit more about Role Models in a moment. But I really feel it's that experience in education as a teacher in a primary school for 12 years and my time as a senior deputy head teacher that's given me that real insight into what are the types of skills and attributes that young people need in order to thrive in life rather than just survive. And we talk about that a lot in role models. How do we make sure that each child we work with is becoming their best self? I then moved on from my deputy headship and I trained in coaching. And as Natasha mentioned, I'm now a qualified coach working with parents, adults, but teenagers and children too. And it's often the types of things we explore around resilience, perfectionism, confidence, helping young people to reach their potential. So it's that I'm drawing upon in my work at Role Models. And my role on the team is I create the content of our life skill courses and sessions. You'll see my email address on the screen there. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you've got more questions following this presentation, either about perfectionism, and I know we'll have some Q&A at the end, but also if you've got more questions about role models and what we offer. So just to give you a little context about role models, we are an impact-driven education provider. And we focus on life skills. And by life skills, we define those as social and emotional well-being and dynamic thinking. I know life skills mean many different things to different people, but for us, we've identified that if we can help young people with their social and emotional well-being, we will really help them live life to the fullest. And we're looking at helping them with those skills both at home and at school, but also when it comes to their future and the workplace, employability, which all might feel quite a way off right now, but these skills really matter when it comes to our children's future. And we talk a lot about being work ready. I also like the term life ready, because it's not just about the workplace. Actually, these skills are so important just when it comes to building relationships, our happiness, our satisfaction, our mindset. And the way we do that is we like to think that we complement traditional academic education by delivering our online and offline courses. And we're working with children between the ages of 3 to 15 years old. And as Natasha mentioned at the beginning, we are specifically focusing on leadership, confidence, resilience, creative problem solving, collaboration, and a growth mindset. And we've not picked those skills by accident. Those are the types of skills that have been highlighted, particularly by the World Economic Forum, as being the key skills. They talk about the top 10 skills, and if you look in that list are the ability to communicate, to problem solve, to negotiate, and that's why we've picked those skills in particular. Now, today's presentation is all about perfectionism, and I think this really does sit within life skills, attributes, and mindset. And I'm hoping we're going to be able to unpick a little bit what is perfectionism all about. But before I dive into that, just to add to our work at Role Models, why we do it, why do we believe these life skills are so important? I'm sure many of you joining will be with me and will understand the importance of these life skills, but just to take a moment to really think about how do they impact? Well, number one, I think the most important aspect is they improve mental health and well-being. And this has always been important. We want our children, first and foremost, to be happy, to have healthy relationships with other people. And for me, actually, a healthy relationship with self. If we can develop that as they grow, they will grow into a good grounding and good mental health as they develop and grow into adults. And mental health and well-being has always been important, but during a pandemic, post-pandemic, even more important when we think about the resilience, the right type of mindset to approach learning and life. Second reason, and I think, I often shine a spotlight on this one because for many parents and some educators, they might believe it's an either or. Do we focus on life skills or do we focus on academia? And I always take every opportunity to point out that by developing life skills, we can increase academic attainment. If we think about developing a child's positive mindset, their resilience in the classroom, their readiness to take risks, their ability to respond to adversity, all of those types of skills make a difference. You know, that's what helps them take these chances to be able to respond to a difficult grade or exam result and actually learn from it and pick themselves up. And then thirdly, talking about the future. So future job prospects, employability. We hear this time and time again that employers, are no longer looking for candidates that just have the grades, the qualifications alone. They are looking for candidates that have those, but also have that balanced with strong life skills, the ability to communicate effectively, to be able to solve their own problems independently and be resilient. And I'll use that phrase again, not just work ready, but life ready too. I know all of you joining will agree with me that these skills really matter just in day-to-day life too. So let's bring this back to perfectionism. A good place to start is actually thinking, what is it? And it can be defined as the refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. And when I read that definition, I straight away can think of children who I've worked with in the past, who I currently work with. I can think of adults and friends. I can think of myself. This refusal to accept anything short of perfect. And I think perfectionism has often been bigged up quite a lot, hasn't it? There's that classic response in an interview situation. What's your area for development? Oh, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And many people might say to us, well, isn't it a good thing? Surely being a perfectionist is a positive thing. If my child strives for perfection, well, that's great. That's really good. And there are certainly lots of positive aspects about it. For example, being intrinsically motivated. You'll often find that a perfectionist is that type of person that wants to strive to do the best they can do, and that motivation comes from within. They don't necessarily have to be motivated and enthused by forces outside of themselves, because they are driven. They want to excel. They are striving for success. And actually, sometimes they can be quite self-reflective because, of course, they're quite critical. So they will naturally, after doing an activity or a task, without being persuaded to reflect, they will already be picking it apart and thinking, how could I have done that better? So some might say that there are positive aspects to perfectionism. However, I think as we are all here this morning, we know that perfectionism can also be quite toxic. And again, particularly in our children, when we see those perfectionist tendencies creep in, they can have quite negative consequences too. And I just want to share some of these that I often see in the children I work with. And I'm sure as I read through them, you might recognize some of these. So worry. If I'm a perfectionist, I'm constantly worrying. Am I doing it to the level I require? Am I letting people down? Am I slipping from this pedestal of being known as someone who gets everything right? And I'm beginning to worry about that. I have this fear of failure that I'm carrying with me all the time, because failure is the ultimate no-no, right? I'm defined by my success. Therefore, if I fail, I will crumble. Procrastination, and I don't think we talk about this enough, it's a real byproduct of being a perfectionist. If I'm worried about getting it perfect, the longer I put something off, the less I have to face that reality. Okay, so procrastination, I see that a lot, an awful lot. Anxiety, so not just worrying about things, but that when that worry becomes anxious feelings to the point that I'm, it might be manifesting itself in many different ways in my behavior, in my interactions. I might be withdrawing from engaging with people and activities because this worry has turned into a huge amount of anxiety for me. Or maybe just a refusal, point blank, to take risks. It's safer for me to not take part in that race, to not take part in that competition, because then I can protect myself from that failure. And then lastly, that self-critical inner voice. I talked about the positives of being self-reflective as a perfectionist, but if we take it to the kind of toxic end, that inner voice can become so critical and so loud that it can become very unhelpful. Every task we do, we have that inner voice within us. You should have done better. You've made a mistake. It's not your best work. And that can be really, really hard, can't it? For us as adults, but particularly for our children. So what can we do about it? This talk is all about letting go of the more toxic side of perfectionism. Well, I'd love to share 10 top tips with you. And I've come up with these in a way that I hope they are practical things that we can put into place. Often they might be about how we respond to something our child says or does. It could be a strategy that we actually actively use, or it could just be a phrase. And again, I'm going to point out that I hope these are useful for the children that you have and work with, but also for you personally. So I'm going to take you through these 10 top tips. And I should also mention at this stage, these slides will be available to you all as well. So tip number 1. This might be something that you've heard already quite a few times, but the benefit of focusing on the process rather than the outcome. And for me, this has got to be number 1, because if we think about where perfectionism comes from, children aren't born being a perfectionist. So what's the root of it? Well, if we break it down, all the information, the praise, the feedback that children often get is based on the outcome of what they do. Did you get it right or wrong? Did you get 10 out of 10? Did you come first? And so it's sort of no surprise that they begin to attribute everything about, am I doing it right or wrong? And that's somewhat the system that we're in, okay? And we do want our children to strive for success. Let's be clear about that. We want them to reach their potential. My suggestion here is that we balance that out, okay? And we praise the process as much as the outcome. And what that might sound like is, rather than only saying, wow, fantastic, you got 100%. You got 10 out of 10, or you came first in that race. Wow. Is to be able to say, wow, you got 100%. That's fantastic. But do you know what I'm most proud of? I'm most proud of the effort and the grit that you put in to your practice or your revision, or the fact that when, that tricky question came up, you said you didn't give up, or you made a mistake halfway through, but you didn't let that throw you off. So we need to be really particular about that feedback that we're giving, and let's focus less on the perfection of the outcome and more about progress. And I just want to talk quickly here about, we need to shift our child's attention away from it too, because often they're the ones that are hung up on it. Oh, I didn't come first in the race, or I didn't get the top mark in the class. I feel really upset about that. We can then help them see that we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. And yes, sometimes progress can be measured against others, but actually, often it can be measured against ourselves. So, in that example of the running race, if your child comes home and says, yet again, it's the 3rd year running and I still didn't win, I feel like giving up. It's about us saying, I hear you, you didn't win, but let's look at your performance and your attributes that you showed, and actually your individual progress. Did you come quicker? Did you do it faster than last time, than last year? Because often children will naturally they'll be biased. They'll just be looking at the overall outcome. So we need to help them look at themselves. Has your test score gone up since last week? It might not be the best in the class, but you are making individual progress. And that's all we're asking for. Your best is always good enough. So that could be something that you put into practice. Being ready to, yes, you can focus on the outcome. I have parents say to me, but sometimes I want to say, wow, you got the top mark, or wow, you got chosen for that. And I say, absolutely, please, do that. But just balance it off with the attributes too. Tip number 2 is about us as the adults and watching our self-talk. I mentioned that inner critical voice that we can hear in our children, and we are always being watched and listened to, an awful amount by the children we have and work with, and they are listening to the way we talk to ourselves. And this can be so innocently done. And it's not our fault. We've grown up perhaps with an inner critic within ourselves, but it could be as simple as we're doing a task and we say to ourselves out loud, oh, I'm so stupid. Oh, what am I doing? I've messed this up. Or it could be, no, I'm never going to be able to do that. No, I won't be able to achieve that. Or it could be as simple as, I can't believe I failed. Oh, this is terrible. Our reaction to making a mistake. And of course, our children are listening in. And so as much as possible, we need to move away from critical self-talk and keep it more positive. And beyond that, I actually think we've got a real opportunity here, an opportunity to model. So not only keeping it positive, internal for ourselves, but actually let's say it out loud. Let's actually have a sort of monologue that our children are hearing. So instead of hearing us say, oh, I'm so stupid, or I can't believe I got that wrong, they're hearing us say phrases such as, oh, do you know what? That's not perfect, but right now, that's good enough. Or it could be, oh, yeah, I've made a mistake here, but I'm okay with that. And just these little things, they are responding to how we respond, and they will be picking up on that. So let's watch our self-talk. Tip number 3, a really simple one, and I urge you to give this a try. This is something I've used in my work time and time again. The power of the word and I'll just explain what I mean by this. If I'm a perfectionist, if you give me feedback, I am ignoring everything you say to me because I can hear in your voice and I'm waiting for the but. Okay, so if I'm a perfectionist and I'm a child and my teacher says to me, yeah, you've done a really good job with this bit here, and that's here, and I'm just waiting for the but. I'm waiting for the criticism because that's the bit I care about, and I care about it so much that I will ignore all the bit that comes before. Okay, and we do this as adults as well. So we need to find a way to frame our feedback in a way that they're not waiting for the but. And replacing but with and works time and time again. This is nothing new. You may have heard this before, but it really does work. So, for example, it might sound like you've worked really hard on that piece of writing. And you know what? Now you can go through and maybe add some punctuation. The and just softens it. And for a perfectionist, it's a lot easier to swallow. But it also just opens them up to this idea of feedback in general. Feedback is not something I need to be fearful of. It's not something I need to take personally. It's just an and. And there's always going to be an and. We can always improve. So give this one a try. It's very simple, but I hope very effective. Tip number 4. Another favorite of mine is a phrase that I think is very helpful when working with perfectionists. And it's this: I think 2 things are true. Okay. And I just wanted to explain what I mean by this. So let's imagine a situation where your child is sat doing a piece of work, or let's say they're doing a painting, and they're doing a painting and it's all going really, really well, and then something goes wrong. They've knocked over the water all over their painting, or they've messed up the one particular part of the drawing. In that moment, a perfectionist will crumble, because the rug's just been taken underneath them. Okay, it was going really well, and now I've just ruined it. If we come in at that moment as parents and say, no, it's fine, it's absolutely fine, you'll fix it, they can't hear it, it's too much. Whereas if we come in at that moment and say, okay, do you know what? I think two things are true here. Number one, and we recognize the bit that they're struggling with. So in my example I've put here, I think two things are true here. You really feel like you've messed up the face on your drawing. And when they hear us say that, that drives the connection bit. You've seen me. I feel heard, I feel valued. You're recognizing that I feel I've screwed up here. I've really messed up. And I also know, the second part of that, I also know it's a very small part of the drawing, okay? So two things are true. You can feel like you have really made a huge mistake, but then you come in with the second part, which is, I know you're great at being creative. You'll find a way to fix this. This takes some practice. But in that moment when they're just about to quit, to give up, to crumble, try the two things are true here. I see that you really feel this has happened, but I also know you're strong and you're creative and you can make it work. Or I also know that it's a really small part of the drawing that you've done. Let's put it into context. But if we just come in and say part two, they won't hear it. So part one is really, really important. Two things are true here. Tip number 5, another really simple one, but it's a mantra, a phrase that I think as a family we can begin to really embed in the work and the language that we use. Done is sometimes better than perfect. And if this is something that we can really get our children to understand, actually being efficient is also a very important skill to have. And I think it's quite underrated. We talk a lot about life skills, work skills, and attributes, and we focus a lot on being good and being, striving for success. But actually, in the world we live in, being efficient is just as important. And the perfectionist is the type of child that will stay working on a task long beyond when they should, because they are adding more and going and going and going until they feel it is perfect. But actually, the more efficient child will be someone that will say, okay, do you know what? I've spent long enough on this. It's good enough. I've tried my best, and my best is what we're looking for. And done actually is sometimes better than perfect. And I think within this one here, we can challenge that definition of success. So success can be measured and quantified in different ways, can't it? And sometimes being successful is being the person that can manage time, can manage the different projects that we've got going on, and can be organized enough to say, okay, I'm doing my homework this way and I'm doing it then, and I'm managing all these different responsibilities that I've got. And part of that is going to be managing my perfectionism, managing how much time and effort I put in. So done is sometimes better than perfect. Tip number 6, and I think this is often a real missed opportunity: homework. Love it or hate it, homework is something that we have. And when your child is doing their homework at home, I think particularly if you have a perfectionist, there are loads of ways you can use this to help them lessen that perfectionism. So I think as parents, often we might be inclined to get our child to sit down, to do their homework, and maybe they come and show us, and maybe we get them to keep coming back to it until we tell them it's done, it's perfect. And I just want us to think for a moment about the message that we're giving when we do that. So when they come and show us, go back, correct this bit here. No, go back, go back. We're basically saying this isn't good enough until it's perfect. Now, I know what we're doing there. We want them to do a piece of work that is the best it can be. But in one sense, if the message we want to give is your best is good enough, what about if we get them to work on it, bring it to us to have a look, and maybe we just are more measured with our feedback. So maybe it could be, I can see, 4 things that you might need to go back and have a look at. Go and have a look at those 4 things, and then let's stop your homework, let's give it in. And my goodness, as an ex-teacher, your child's teacher will find it so much more insightful to be able to see a piece of work that your child has done, has self-corrected, and that is a true reflection of their understanding. Because let's also remember that through the mistakes they're making, those are opportunities to gain that real insight into misconceptions. If it's a completely perfect piece of work that's been worked back on again and again and again, then it's not that helpful for the teacher. And actually, is it helpful for the child to give that message that keep going back until every single thing has been picked upon and is perfect? Now, you might have a child where you feel that does work for, giving them quite a few corrections, but I'm highlighting this number 6 tip for those children who really are suffering with that perfectionist tendency. I think just be measured with the number of things we're shining a spotlight on, and let's reassure them, you've worked on that for however long, you've tried your very best, that's brilliant, let's stop there, let's hand it in. And if it comes back with some mistakes, that's okay. And you can use this with your child, explain to them, that helps your teacher. Those mistakes will help your teacher understand what you know, what you don't know, what you need a bit more help with. So using homework as an opportunity. Tip number 7 is speaking back to your inner critic. And here I'm talking about helping your child to do this, but you might also want to give this one a go yourselves. When we notice that inner critic, and we really have to listen into it, I do a lot of work with the children I coach about what is that voice saying, and understanding that that voice isn't true, it isn't us, it is, and it's helpful for children to actually personify it, to imagine this inner critic. And we often, for younger children, we draw it, this monster, this inner critic, we name it, we give it an actual name. And if we can help children understand that it's not true, it's not helpful, and we don't have to believe it, because of course children grow up thinking whatever their inner dialogue is saying, that it's fact. You're rubbish, you're going to make a mistake, this isn't good enough. And that can be driving that perfectionist because they're listening in too intently. So we need to give them the skills to be able to firstly listen in, secondly recognize that they have a choice whether to listen to it or not. And then thirdly, I like to empower the child by speaking back to it. And I say, let's give it a name, let's be bossy, right? Let's, if your inner critic is called whatever, Bob, you need to say to Bob, no, thank you, Bob, not today. I can hear you. And actually, I'm choosing not to listen. And by giving it that character, it's just a lot easier, particularly for younger children, to understand that I'm going to say no to it. So give that one a try, speaking back to your inner critic. Top tip number 8 is actually shining a spotlight on what's the worst that can happen. Now, anxiety in general, I would say, tends to come in 2 different parts. Okay, so if I'm a child and I've got high levels of anxiety about something, it might be if X happens, if this thing happens, I'm not going to be able to cope. And that could be so many different things, couldn't it? If I don't get invited to the party, I'm not going to be able to cope. I'll have no friends. For a perfectionist, it could be if I take part in that race and come last, I'm not going to be able to cope. If I do this tricky maths paper, I'm not going to be able to do it. Fill in X for your child. What we often do as parents and educators is we focus on the first part. Okay, we focus on X, and we try and convince our child that X won't happen. Okay, so if your child says, oh, if I lose the race, I won't be able to cope, and we say, don't worry, you don't know, you won't lose the race. Or if I find this maths paper really hard, I don't know what I'll do. You won't find it hard, you'll be fine. Now, what we're trying to do there is reassure our child. But I've used a but, or maybe I should replace that with an and. What we're actually doing isn't that helpful. It doesn't help to dissipate that anxiety, because we're just trying to convince them that what they're thinking about won't happen. What's more helpful is to talk through what would happen if it did. Okay. And for perfectionists, this is very powerful. So focus on the second part. What is it that your child is worrying about as the outcome? And if you can talk through, right, well, let's just think for a minute. If you took part in this race and you do come last, what would that feel like? What would happen? And if we can help to build their confidence that in that worst case scenario, if it happens, they'll be okay. Okay. And let's be realistic. We need to say to our child, it might feel uncomfortable. You might be upset. It might not feel that nice. But will it be the end of the world, or will you be okay? And if they can begin to understand, actually, yeah, maybe you're right. It would be difficult, but it would be okay. That is what dissipates the hold of anxiety. Okay. So focus on the second part, not just the first part. Because if we constantly just try and convince our child that what they're worrying about won't happen, it's not effective. But if we can build their confidence that they will be okay, that gives them the strength, I think, to actually take the risk in the first place and to give it a go. And of course, I've made that sound very easy. You might be sat there thinking, well, my child really would say, well, what's the worst that could happen? It would be terrible. I don't want to do it for the reason that I think I would fall apart. So we need to do lots of work there. And I suppose some coaching almost as a parent to say, well, let's think, is it really the worst thing ever? And let's talk about times that we felt uncomfortable. A phrase I often use, have I told you about the time when? As a parent, as an educator, we can come in and say, have I told you about the time when I lost this race? And let's talk about how that felt for me. And that really drives connection and might help your child think, okay, so, you've been through that. Maybe I could too. Tip number 9, dealing with procrastination. So I mentioned right at the beginning that procrastination can often be a byproduct of perfectionism. We put things off till the last possible moment because we don't want to take the risk. So how can we support our child with that? Well, again, very simple idea, but breaking down bigger tasks into smaller steps. If I'm a perfectionism and you ask me to do this big task all in one that I'm fearful of failing at, I will simply say no, or I will put it off. If I can break that down into manageable steps, I am much, much more likely to get going at it because it feels safer. It's not this huge risk I'm taking. It's small ones, small steps. And I think coupled with this, I would also say, let's build that appreciation of the process. So can we help our perfectionists really develop that love of the process? So rather than trying an activity and feeling like a failure if I can't do it straight away, let's actually build that understanding of when we learn, the journey is the beautiful part, the journey of making a mistake and actually learning from it, feeling like we're going up those steps. I think so many children will try a new activity for a first time, and if they can't master it or ace it straight away, they're seeing it as a personal reflection on their self-worth. If we can re-educate them to understand that new things are always going to be difficult at first and challenging, and that's the joy of the learning process, where we challenge ourselves. And then top tip number 10, a slightly more sort of a complex one here, and this would certainly come from my coaching background, is learning to own our own mistakes. And for me, this one is bound up in how perfectionists can often carry shame around getting things wrong, and shame around sharing that with other people. Now, if we can help break down that element of shame, they might be more ready to accept their mistakes and the idea of failure. Now, how do we do that? Well, I think it's a real cultural thing, isn't it? That if we want our children to own their mistakes and to understand that mistakes are okay, we need to talk about them more. And I kind of use that analogy. There's a lovely phrase about slipping on a banana skin, and I forget who said this now, but when you slip on a banana skin and fall over, people laugh at you, okay? If you tell people that you slipped on a banana skin and fell over, it's your laugh, you own it. And I often work with children about, if we feel shame or fear over a mistake that we've made or a failure, and that we're going to be found out, oh, I feel really shameful, don't tell anybody I got 3 out of 10. Why don't we try owning that? And it can be done in very small ways. Encourage your child to say, rather than hide it away, how does it feel when you tell somebody that? So it could be your best friend. It could be coming home and saying, I got 3 out of 10. And rather than hide it, I'm going to tell you about it and tell you how I'm going to learn from that experience. Because the more we breed that shame over the mistakes we make, that's what drives the perfectionism, because it becomes this thing that we hide away, that we don't want to tell people about. And we only tell them when we are successful. We only share the positive, the successes. And I suppose as well, modeling as parents, just as much as we come home and we tell our families about the successes from our own work, let's be ready to own our mistakes and say, do you know what? I made this big mistake today. Let me tell you about it, and let me tell you what it's taught me. So learning to own our own mistakes. So those are the 10 top tips. I hope you're all still with me, and this is helpful to you all. I've got a couple more slides that I just wanted to share, because I thought I couldn't miss the opportunity to talk to you all about perfectionism without mentioning a growth mindset. And you'll see on the screen here a table that just charts mindset alongside achievement. And I just want to take a moment to explain this, that along the bottom, we've got mindset. And let's imagine a child, they could either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And along the side, we've got their achievement. So, how they're doing attainment wise, how successful they're being, maybe academically. Now, if we look at each quadrant, the ideal quadrant that our child would be in would be the top right-hand one. High achievement with a growth mindset. Okay, that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for success, but that they've actually got a growth mindset that underpins it. And that would sound like, I've developed an ability, that's how I've got here. I love improving, and I've got lots of strategies to deal with setbacks should they happen. Now, the reason I'm sharing this in relation to perfectionism is because perfectionists often sit in the top left-hand quadrant. So perfectionists might sort of have this attitude of, I'm naturally good at this. I really love this feeling of being successful. And the stinger, I don't know what I'd do if things went wrong. And this can be quite a dangerous place to be, because it appears that I'm fine, I'm being successful, I'm good at this, but I'm sort of teetering, because the minute things go wrong, I might crumble. And so it's about what can we do to edge the child ever closer to the right hand quadrant. High ability, high achievement, but with that growth mindset. And I hope that some of the tips I've talked through this morning would help that move. It's about regularly, constantly working on developing that mindset. How are we responding to things? What's our view on failure and making mistakes? And do we feel that capability, that self-efficacy? You know I can be successful, but crucially, when I meet adversity, I also know I can cope with it. My self-worth is not just pinned on my success. I know I've got more going for me than just that. So I hope that's helpful. And then my last slide here is, again, just to share some other responses, language that we can use as parents, as educators. If our child says to us, this is too hard, it's too tricky, let's use those responses. You're stretching your brain, you're helping it get stronger. If we hear them say, I'm scared, I quit, it's just stepping in and reminding them, well, doing new things can feel scary. And remember when is a very useful phrase. Remember when you felt this way about X, Y, Z. Remember this time last year when you felt scared about doing your swimming or your karate, whatever it might be. And now look at you. So let's use that same mindset here. I quit. I often hear this from children. And in that moment when they want to quit, it can be helpful to step in and say, show me the hard bit, because your child will be thinking the whole thing is too difficult. Whereas if we say, okay, I hear you, show me the hard bit, it helps them see that actually it's not the whole thing you're struggling with, it's just that one part. And now you know that, maybe that feels more like something you can work on. I'm stupid for finding this difficult. Again, be realistic as a parent. I can see you've not mastered it yet. What might help? What strategy, what kind of thing can you do or can I do to help in this moment? And then the last one, crucial for our perfectionists that we're talking about, I don't need feedback. If you have a child that resists any type of feedback from yourself as parents or from teachers, it's really making them understand that feedback can help you get better. And you know what? Getting better is more important than being good. We're not looking for perfection straight away. We're looking for progress, and feedback is the key within that. So I hope some of those phrases have been helpful. To draw this all to an end before I hand back to Natasha, I hope those ideas on perfectionism have been helpful to you all. And I have to say, at Role Models, we are incredibly excited about continuing to work with the Cranleigh community. And I know we've hopefully got more things coming up in the calendar to support parents and hopefully pupils too. If any of you do want to get in touch to find out more about our work, as I mentioned at the beginning, we've got lots of online, offline courses that we put on for children. Do get in touch. All of our details are on the slide here. And it's been an absolute pleasure sharing the morning with you and talking you through these ideas. I will stop sharing my screen and hand back to Natasha and to see if we've got any questions.
Thank you so much, Louise. I was busy noting down all these amazing top tips, not just for myself, but actually things that I can do at home with my 2.5-year-old already. And even I'm about to teach a lesson in 15 minutes or so. And I was thinking, how could I actually bring more of this into my lesson, as a teacher? There's a lot of positive comments coming through for you, Louise, especially, and Role Models. Thanks so much for the informative talk. So useful, it's spot on, and really helpful. And as we come to the end of and we're all getting kind of quite sick of using this language, but as we do get, come to the end of quite a challenging year for all of us, to have light at the end of the tunnel in the sense of your talk, and to be able to share strategies and top tips and tools for our parents and our community members and even our teachers. I know that a lot of our teachers will be wanting to watch this back. It just feels reassuring that we are moving in the right direction to continue to help the young people in our care. So a massive thank you on behalf of me from the Wellbeing Department and the Cranleigh community. As I say, and as Louise said to the community, it's definitely not a bye-bye, it's a see you soon, because we truly want to, and we believe in what Role Models stands for, and everything that goes in behind all of these talks, into the research, into the programs. And as I say to the parents out there, I'm really looking forward to, and especially my replacement, Liz Hewitt, will be looking forward to working with Louise and Role Models on providing additional support, even training for parents to equip you with the tools. As we are coming towards the end of our time with Louise, if there are any questions, please do, parents, don't feel afraid to put them in the chat. Louise, I had a question. Those tips were really clear. They were really accessible. Sometimes we hear from different speakers and different organisations, and sometimes it is a bit far-fetched into what we can actually do in our family homes or in our school communities or in our wider communities. And I did feel that your top tips were achievable. They were tangible. They were something that we could all do from today. The question I would have for you, Louise, would you say, and there may not be an easy answer to this, but would you say, in terms of the working relationship between teachers and parents, and if we're looking at perfectionism specifically, is there a need for us as teachers and as parents to be developing, the top tips and strategies seamlessly together, and, to have those conversations? Because I know I speak a lot to parents, and there's a lot of parents that are doing things at home, but there's also some parents that also expect it to be much more on the school, and that's totally understandable. What would you say about the teacher and parent relationship in dealing with or managing, a child with perfectionism and this growth mindset?
Yeah, it's a really good point, Natasha. And actually, I'd say it's key, because going back to the point that I made around homework, if we're taking one strategy, be that at school or at home, that needs to be in sync, doesn't it? Because if I'm the parent of a child, or indeed the teacher, and I'm specifically going with a strategy of not highlighting too many mistakes, or the other way, highlighting lots because that's what we feel that child needs, that needs to be reflected in both contexts. So I think lots of communication, lots of kind of working with the same strategies, and I think that will be also felt by the child, won't it? We know that, oh, okay, this is the same approach I'm using at school. This is what my teacher asked me to do. And that I've got that shared expectation too, that, I'm the same is expected of me when I'm doing my homework at home as it is when I'm doing my work in the classroom. So it's much easier for the child, rather than having different systems in different places. So as much communication as possible, I would say.
That's really good to hear, because we are still a newish school in the sense of 7 years, and I feel really proud of our community working together to have that continuous dialogue to best support the children in our care. So that's really reassuring to hear. And I think it's important to say, and I know you've already said it, but for me to say that representing Cranleigh, for parents to reach out, if you feel that there is a certain strategy or something you're doing at home that's really working, and you want the tutor or class teacher to know that, parents, please do reach out to us. So as Louise said, we can have that continuous dialogue. I just want to wrap up now, Louise, just because time is, and you have covered so much in your talk. Actually, I feel that it's so little for me to ask you at this point, because there were so many, as I said, tangible strategies and tools that we could go away, and I'm going to try in my drama lesson with year 3 in the next 10 minutes. Thank you, Louise. Thank you so much for, as I say, providing an energy and a spark that I think we're all trying to pull on as a community as we reach to the end of the term, and especially as a lot of us have been away with our away from our families for so long. the sense of community in home and being able to have that dialogue if we feel we have questions about our children is very tight with home and school. Being able to try this at home with family members is quite limiting for a lot of us that are quite far away from our families at this point. And as I said, you've provided tools and strategies that are accessible now, that we can use now, not later. So for me, it's definitely a see you soon. We are so excited to be able to continue to work with role models. And from the comments I'm seeing from the parents, they also want to see you again and to be able to interact with our community. There is further questions coming through on the parent forum at the moment. So parents, those that are watching, what I will do, as Louise said, I will put this recording into the parent newsletter this Thursday. I will also kindly, as agreed by Louise, put the resources from the PowerPoint. And as Louise said, if you have any further questions, please do reach out to the school or directly to role models who have been open and effective in their communication. So I know you're enjoying some wonderful sunshine in the UK, Louise. So please do continue to enjoy that. And thank you so much for getting up so early to do the talk for the community this morning. We wish you all the best, and we will definitely speak to you soon.
Great. And Natasha, thank you so much again. It's been a real pleasure, and all the best to the Cranleigh community for the rest of your term.
Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you so much to the community. Stay safe and have a wonderful summer when it arrives.